Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome back to the Cowboys Roundup, episode 11. We're a month away from the draft, I think, and things have slowed down on the Cowboys front when it comes to free agency, but that doesn't mean that we don't have things to talk about. We got a couple of topics to go over in today's episode, but before we go any further, Chris, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Because the way I'm looking at it, we gotta at least get 10,000.
Ain't that the truth? But ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this on the VOD, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to both of our channels. Greatly appreciate that. And with that, I think we should just get straight into it. So, Chris, they haven't made any moves in free agency for the past week now, I would say. They did lose Cooper Rush, I believe. I'm not sure if that was on the previous episode, but point being is that they haven't brought anybody else in, and it does look like the Cowboys are pretty much done unless something changes. And so I guess we can, we did initial grades for their maneuvers in free agency. I believe we both gave them C pluses, or I think you gave them a B. Am I wrong on that? I don't
C
want to.
plus. I gave him a C
Okay,
plus. Yeah.
got it. I just didn't want to put words in your mouth or anything. Just want to make
Oh
sure.
yeah, no, oh, no, you're good. You're good. Yeah.
But we are in a precarious situation, I will say. The Dallas Cowboys are going into their first season since 2013 without Zach Martin or DeMarcus Lawrence. You look at who they've signed, and I believe it's a total of 8 outside free agents, and only one of them is on a 2-year contract. But we finally actually have the details for most of these contracts, it looks like, because we didn't have them initially. So just to kind of fill in on that, we didn't know how much. We didn't know how much. I believe it was Israel Mukwama was making. It's a 1-year, $1.75 million deal. And then I believe the only other contract that we didn't know about was Jack Sanborn. We still don't know the details of his contract. But point being is that, I was listening to some other shows in my downtime, but it does feel like business as usual for the Dallas Cowboys, except they're just going after more players this year compared to last year or the years prior, right? But they have made it 2 trades. I think that help you in the short term, but not in the long term. But the reason I go on this little long diatribe, Chris, is because I want to start off here. Do you feel we're still in business as usual for the Dallas Cowboys, or do you feel like there's a bit of something else going on? Because to me, part of me feels like this is still business as usual, considering how they've operated.
Yeah, I mean they're doing a little more than what they usually do. Here's one thing I will say about it is that like my biggest problem with what they've done so far this offseason is that like the Dre Greenlaw contract, you could have given him that money. You could have given Jordan Lewis the money that he got. And with the additions that you would have made, like, man, I would have felt really damn good about this defense. Um, it seems like they're attacking defense in free agency. When I look at the additions of Dante Fowler, Solomon Thomas, I think Solomon Thomas is going to split time between defensive tackle and defensive end. So I think you're pretty good at defensive end for the current moment. Um, this to me is shaping up like, hey, we're going to go draft a receiver or a running back in the first round. But yeah, when it comes to the business and the way they do it, it's kind of the same thing that we've seen in the past, where they look at these guys that they had high draft grades on. They're giving them another chance. They're trading very little assets to go get players. So, I mean, we'll see how it pans out for them. I mean, some of these guys have legit potential. Uh, you know, at first, Kenneth Murray, I wasn't a big fan of the trade, but now listening to people that I really trust, Okoye, Brian Broaddus, break that trade down and have them say like, "Hey, watch the tape on the guy. He's pretty damn good, or not pretty damn. He's a fine player." Uh, you know, but it is very much business as usual. They're taking swings at guys who had potential. They're giving out very low contracts outside of the Dante Fowler deal. So yeah, no, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that for me at least is that when we talk about the business as usual, right? I think at least for me, I can't speak for you, is that I felt like the Dallas Cowboys needed to change their approach to this offseason. And again, when I say that, that doesn't mean they needed to sign everybody. We know that. It's more so a matter of they needed to go out there and add a couple starters, maybe 2 or 3, to ensure that when they go into the draft, they're not in a situation where there's like, yo, we have to hit on every pick or we're screwed. And I still feel like that they're in that position still. Like you can argue, well, space. They did add a guy like Jack Sanborn, who could be a starter in this league and was, I believe, for Chicago. You got a guy in Robert Jones that could start on the offensive line. You added Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams, and people have been
Dante
trying.
Fowler's a starter.
And
I will
Dante
say that.
Fowler, sorry, and Dante Fowler as well. My point is like people that are defending the front office are trying to position it. Well, they did go get starters. What the hell are you talking about? And here's where I understand where you're coming from, but this is where I have a problem with their roster construction. For me, if you're getting a guy that's going to be a starter for you for the next, or for what you would hope the next year, I would want the starter to have at least a 2 to 3 year deal, right? Like for me, a Dante Fowler signing that you did for him, I was hoping would be like a 2 or 3 year deal because then you have control over him for the next couple of seasons. And again, you can structure the contract so you don't got to worry about, oh, I don't want to pay too much money for a guy that's not going to be here long term. But this is where I hate their roster construction, Chris, is they do the 1 year deals to hope to get the best out of them and get a comp pick the following year. But then what do they do with those comp picks? They go and do the same thing. And it's like they want to act like they're the smartest people in the room, but they're not. Right. And I think that's like, I have no problem with doing 1 year deals. I want to be very, very clear on that. But the last thing I'll say is to my point, I just don't like when they do the 1 year deals only, right? Like you could have gone and gotten a Dre Greenlaw. You could have gotten H.R. Davies or both of them. And whether you like them or not, I mean, the fact is that, if you are putting yourself in the same position every single year, it's really hard to stabilize a roster when you keep circling guys in and out. Like you're going to have all of these dudes you just acquired leave next year unless you resign them, except for Solomon Thomas. But yeah, I mean, what do you think on that? Or do you have any other thoughts on that?
Well, here's what I will say. I will defend the front office from this standpoint. We don't know if Dante Fowler and his agent said, "Hey, we would prefer to just sign the 1 year deal." Maybe the Cowboys were trying to get him under contract for a few years, and he was like, "No, I prefer give me the 1 year deal and let me prove myself." It could have been something like that. But I mean, like when we talk about Dre Greenlaw and Tre'Davious Ward, whatever comp pick you would have lost for signing those guys, most likely would not be as good as those guys. So that to me is where this whole comp pick thing, because now you're starting to hear it because, and I'm not trying to take a shot at the guy because I do think he's a tremendous general manager. Don't get it twisted. But like the Eagles now, everyone's like, well, they have 20 draft picks and look at how many comp picks they have. Oh my God. Like the Cowboys have been doing that for like years now. Like this is not anything new. I don't agree with the philosophy. Like if you're getting comp picks, that means you're losing good players. Like I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing to lose good football players. Like great, you're getting a comp pick in return, but you lost a good football player. Like if a player is good enough to get you a comp pick in return, that means he's a good football player, and you just lost that. So you're just replacing a good football player with somebody who might not even be good, who might not even make your roster. Mm-hmm. So that's a big problem I have with this whole comp pick thing that they're just so damn obsessed with. Just because you have a comp pick, it doesn't mean that these guys are going to end up being good players.
Right. And that's kind of where my point is that like, that's where when I say like they act like they're the smartest people in the room, like that's part of where I come from with that. Like, cause it's just like, yo, like if you keep doing the same thing and you're expecting different results, you're literally that's insanity. But to bring up the point about like, the multiple year contracts, and stuff like that. And that is a fantastic point. Like we don't know what the agents are thinking because they could be possibly looking at because as an agent, you're probably familiar with how the Cowboys do business, or really all of the NFL teams do business. And you're thinking, hey, I can get a 1 year deal with the Cowboys. They're a big brand. They'll have a lot of eyes on you. So if you do play well, guess what? Then I can go get a contract elsewhere, And bringing that up, I wanted to pivot to Rico Dowdle for a moment, just because there was a report that came out that the reason why Rico Dowdle went to the Panthers instead of coming back to the Cowboys or really going anywhere else is because no team offered him a multi-year contract. And I think this kind of goes to the point of like, and I think we talked about it, like, to me, like, Rico was a guy where he was going to be the stopgap, right, for your next running back. And I think that I would have given him a 2-year deal, or really a 3-year deal that was really a 2-year deal. I mean, I'm not upset that they didn't pay him. I'm not trying to position it like that. But where I think that going to the point of the whole multi-year deals for the Cowboys is that you haven't given out a multi-year contract except for Solomon Thomas for the past 3-4 seasons, which isn't really a good sign, because I think they're the only NFL team to do that. I got to double check my research on that. But I mean, it's just crazy to me because there was other talent that was out there, not just, again, Rico, or signing your own. Like, you had a Najee Harris, who the Cowboys, or I would argue, is better or on par with Rico Dowdle, just my opinion, right? You had multiple other players out there to upgrade this roster, and they elected to just kind of go with we're just going to solidify the depth and not do anything else from there. But did you have any other thoughts on this whole roster construction thing before we move on to some things that, like, rumors and stuff like that that's been going on in the offseason?
Yeah, no, I mean, a rumor that I don't know if we want to talk about it right now. It's not even a rumor. It's just something that like Jeremy Fowler talked about that people are just like running with. Joe Milton. Do we want to talk about this now?
We could actually go on that on this point, because we're getting to the rumor. There was 2 that I wanted to go over. So did you want to take it away? The whole article or rumor that was circulating?
No, I just want to talk about how dumb of
I got you.
an idea this is.
Yeah, I got you. So I'll set the table. So there was a report that came out recently, and I've had conversations behind the scenes, that the Cowboys have been looking at Joe Milton as a possible backup quarterback option or a possible developmental quarterback option, even though he's 25 years old. But again, we don't judge for age, right? But
no, we do. When it comes
we
to
but we do. In the football realm, different story.
Yes.
So he just turned 25 this year. He's a 6'5", 246 product out of Michigan and Tennessee. Well, he came out of Tennessee, but I'm gonna just be honest with you. Like, I've seen people on Twitter try to hype this guy up, and I'm not a fan of his game. I have not been. When Joe Milton was coming out of the draft in 2023, I didn't really look at him as that. Now, look, here's where I was saying this in the green room before we came here, right? We're getting to a point where the Cowboys are literally going to start taking shots at the quarterback position, which is fine. Every team should do so. But what I remember was in the Romo era, when you had like the Dustin Vaughns of the world, the Jamil Showers of the world, the Stephen McGee, like all those guys, when they were trying to find a backup quarterback, they weren't good, and not even just good at being, like, I'm not saying like as a starter or developmental quarterback, but like not even good as a backup. And I think the problem is that for the Cowboys is they don't have a really good eye for talent at the quarterback position. The only reason that Dak Prescott's on this team is because Wade Wilson convinced them to do so, despite multiple times with like, no. But my whole thing that I'm trying to get at here is that I mean, you got to try, but I just don't think Joe Milton is an answer. You know what I mean? And especially if you have to give up draft capital to get a player like him. I mean, what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, no, he's not an answer. Let's just get this out of the way. Joe Milton is not an answer. Joe Milton had one good game against the Buffalo Bills. Do you guys understand? During the preseason, this man completed 37% of his passes in preseason against people who are on the same level, maybe a little bit higher just because they're better players than Joe Milton. The Buffalo Bills did not care that Week 18 game against the New England Patriots. They didn't care. They were like, all right, playoffs are next week. We're just resting our guys. It is what it is. There are better quarterbacks that you can get in like the 5th round this year. Quinn Ewers is a better quarterback than Joe Milton. Kyle McCord, no doubt about it, better quarterback than Joe Milton. Riley Leonard, better quarterback than Joe Milton. Joe Milton is not a good quarterback. Joe Milton does this where he'll come out, have a good game, and everyone will be like, oh, you better watch out for Joe Milton. And then he proceeds to be utterly disappointing. The guy can throw the ball about a mile. I get it. The arm strength is impressive. He will never be a good quarterback. He wasn't a good quarterback in college. He's not going to be a good quarterback in the NFL. And to be honest with you, when I'm looking at quarterbacks, I mean, I'm going to put this out there right now. I have a first-round grade on Kyle McCord, a true first-round grade on Kyle McCord, because when I don't do this thing where I play the narrative game where people are just like, oh, well, look at Kyle McCord's time at Ohio State. Okay, well, everyone told me how great Nico Iamaleava was before the season and how great this guy was going to be. Compare his numbers, his first season starting, to Kyle McCord's numbers first season starting. They're the same, but nobody's giving up on Nico Iamaleava because he's Nico Iamaleava. But with Kyle McCord, he transferred to Syracuse. By the way, Ohio State, you guys see the hat. They had worse quarterback play this year from Will Howard than they would have gotten from Kyle McCord this year. Kyle McCord broke the passing yards record in a season in the ACC. Like, that might be the division where you could say like that division more than any other division in college football produced the best quarterbacks. When you talk about guys like Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, the list goes on and on. Lamar Jackson is a guy who came from the ACC. Kyle McCord broke the passing yards record by nearly 200 yards, just under 200 yards. And when you look at his games after that horrible 5-interception game that he had, damn near 2,300 passing yards, 15 touchdowns to 1 interception, 69% completion percentage, 382.6 yards per game, 170.2 passer rating. This guy was freaking lights out after that game. Everybody's putting a bad light on him because of his time at Ohio State. He was a first-year starter. If Nico Iamaleava next year goes out and puts up the same numbers that Kyle McCord did this year, he'd be a number 1 overall draft pick. And I get it. Nico has the traits, and I do understand it from that perspective. But to me, when I look at Kyle McCord, if he would have went back to Syracuse, this guy was going to be a Heisman candidate and probably a first-round pick next year. So I'm looking at this guy with his stock probably as low as it could have been going into a draft cycle outside of last year, his first year starting. I'm looking at this and I'm saying, wait, I'm getting a guy that I think could be like a starter in the 5th round. Like, yeah, sign me up for that.
Yeah, and that's where I wanted to get at, because I do see, like Hood Cushy 81 in the comment, like, hey, Trey, like, how do you know? Trey Lance did the same. It's just, this is the problem, right? Like, it's not the issue of like when you're trying to get a quarterback. It's the problem of you don't want to give up draft capital for a guy of that caliber. That's kind of what I'm getting at, right? And like you even said, like, hey, I would rather let New England release Milton and then take a swing because he offers athletic. Like, that's fine. Like, I have no problem if you want to, if he's out there in free agency, you want to sign him just to see what happens. Like, that to me is okay, because I don't want to give up my draft capital, which the Cowboys have been notorious of being horrific at managing, in the sense of, like, I mean, for fuck's sake, you gave up a 4th-round pick for a 3rd-string quarterback. You would rather spend that on a guy in this draft that you can take a shot at, like a Kyle McCord. We've talked about him several times on the podcast, and I am a big fan of him. Again, I've said it before on the show that I've had friends that have gone to Syracuse. You've watched him at Ohio State. And I think that
St. Joe's Prep too.
And St. Joe's Prep as well. And I think that he does have the traits of being a guy that can develop into a starter. But the question is where does he go? And I think that, do I think he's on the Cowboys' radar? Probably not, but we'll find out. But I just think that that's where you take your shots at the quarterback position.
I think he is on the radar.
Yeah, we'll see about that. Yeah, I get that point. Don't give up drive and on a we can fix some guy. I get that. Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of where my
Give me
point was
one
that.
second.
Yeah, go for it. No worries. Um, and that's kind of where my point was, is that I do believe that, and I've said this for probably the past 2 years now, is with where Dak Prescott at with his injuries and his age, you need to start taking shots at the quarterback position so that you prepare for that. And the final thing I'll say on that is you don't have to expend a premium draft pick on a quarterback. If someone tells you that, that's really stupid to do um, at this particular point in time, because you still have a lot of other holes to fill. And I've said that before you go and get a premium quarterback, you should build your roster up as best you can. Um, and the Cowboys have stuff on their roster to work with. So, with to kind of land my plane on that particular point in relation to acquiring a guy like Joe Milton, or if they're interested, like I don't want them to go trade like a fifth round pick, which I don't think they would, but I just don't want them to trade premium even though I don't care what you do with day 3 draft capital. I'm not gonna like try to sound like two-faced with it. It's just at the end of the day, with Milton, I would rather you get him if he's a free agent, not give up a draft pick. Because to me, that's a win for the Patriots if they're just like, hey, we got this like a 5th or 6th round pick for a dude that's not even going to start for us, right? So there's that. But did you have any thoughts on this, Chris, before we move on?
Yeah, man. Look, this draft season, I'm going to stand on the table for Kyle McCord because when I watch his tape, I see a damn good quarterback. I see a quarterback that can stay on schedule with his offense, a quarterback that has a really nice release, gets the ball out on time. He got the ball out this year in 2.39 seconds. He's a guy who's a very aggressive decision maker, can make all the throws you want him to make. And so Wilson has this football that they use to track like quarterbacks and the way they throw the ball. Kyle McCord ended up in the 95th percentile of NFL quarterbacks, not just college, NFL quarterbacks. He ended up in the 95th percentile with the way he's able to, with the velocity, with the spiral, with the way he's able to spin the ball. All these things go into it. And he ranked 95th percentile with not just in NFL quarterbacks, on top of the fact that this guy understands how to play quarterback. He's extremely smart. And he's been through some adversity. I mean, look, we talk about what happened at Ohio State. He got a raw deal there. Not only that, but when you look at that 5 interception game that he had, well, after that game, I read off the stats. He played the best football of his entire career. So I'm going to stand on the table for this guy. I would take him over Quinn Ewers. I'd take him over Riley Leonard. I'd take him over the other quarterbacks, Tyler Shugg, Jackson Dart. I'm even taking him over. I think he's a better quarterback than Shedeur Sanders, in my personal opinion. That's just how high I am on him as a player.
Okay, gotcha. For sure, absolutely. Now, there was one other speculative trade proposal that I wanted to go over before we get into like where I think the talking about like what's next for the Cowboys in terms of like how they're trying to build this roster, and that has to go with my guy Katie Drummond over at the Cowboys Wire. He talked about the possibility of like trading Micah Parsons, and more specifically like what that would look like if they were able to get a haul for like Khalil Mack. So basically, just to set the table and set the expectation, it's that if the two sides were to make a deal, it would be like, okay, let's use the Khalil Mack trade from 2018 as the barometer. While you're with the expectation, like, hey, Parsons is younger than Khalil Mack at that particular point in his career, and on top of that, you're going to have to pay him as well. And so this is how the trade went. Okay. So the trade would be that the Cowboys would send Micah Parsons to the Patriots for picks 438, 144, and a 2026 first rounder and a 2027 third rounder. In exchange, the Patriots would acquire Parsons and give him a 5-year, $205 million contract with $90 million fully guaranteed. Now, in his particular mock draft, he landed Abdul Carter, he landed Trevon Henderson, and also he talked about how in the trade he acquired Joe Milton as well, which is also part of why I wanted to talk about the Joe Milton thing. Now, the reason I bring up this trade is not whether, this would be a good idea or a bad idea or this, that. My problem is that the Dallas Cowboys don't think like this when it comes to the roster construction. Like a player where it's like, hey, could we get a haul for that? And could we get a better player or a player on the same thing? But here's the other thing too, right? On the flip side, When you're thinking about trading a player of Micah Parsons' caliber, I feel like that's a problem because, again, for the Cowboys, Chris, we've talked about how this team operates at nauseum. They're not going to do moves like that, but also if you were even to facilitate a trade for Micah Parsons and get the exact same haul that KD Drummond put out, I mean, they're not going to like they're it's just the same cycle. They refuse to pay their guys early. They refuse to draft well or even consider doing these things. And then finally, if we really want to be honest with ourselves, they're unable to think proactively. They think reactively. So, like, for example, like I'll use the cornerback room, for example, right? With you have Bland's contract coming up, I believe, this upcoming year. You then also have Diggs, who there was a rumor that they were going to trade him, which I knew that was bullshit because they weren't going to do that. But my point is that they aren't thinking, well, we could move on from Diggs, who's been giving us some injury concerns and all this. They're not thinking like that. They're just straight up like, oh, well, at the end of the day, we only got so much pie to go around. And
Well, at the end of the day,
yeah, we got that Zickel contract we
yeah,
got to hand out.
we got that quarterback contract. We got that Cupper that we got dead money on, and yeah, what an idiot.
But no, I wanted to hear your thoughts on this whole idea, like of trading Micah Parsons and like because that's been a focal point this entire offseason, which to me is a bit ridiculous. I mean, that's just me though. I mean, what do you think?
Here's the thing. It's kind of hard to look at what like Philly did with that Carson Wentz trade and the way they were able to like replenish their roster with that and not say like, hey, if we traded Parsons to New England and you're able to get Abdul Carter, and it's not like New England's going to be a good football team next year, even with Micah Parsons. You're probably going to end up with a top 10 pick next year as well. It's kind of hard to look at that and say it's not like something that we should entertain. And you get cheaper at that position if you're able to trade Micah for Abdul Carter. I wouldn't do it just because I think Micah Parsons is just a special player. But I'm also not going to poo-poo anybody that has that idea for trading. And me personally, I kind of think it's a waste of time just because I don't see it happening. Like they're not going to trade Micah Parsons. But I mean, like I can't say it's something that like I personally haven't thought about, and then ultimately came to the conclusion that, and I think I'm going to pass on that.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat. I mean, a player like Micah Parsons only comes around once in a while. I'm not saying like he's a once. I mean, you could argue he is a once in a generation player. That's fine, but yeah, exactly. Hoodie Kush, it's not pocket watch. We all know we can manipulate. Exactly, we can manipulate the cap, but they want to manipulate, thinking that they can't. And then yes, Stevie, do no matter what. Look, I just think that for a player like Micah, I don't. The thing I hate, Chris, is that in this fan base, we have individuals that will literally, as soon as a player's contract comes up, they want to turn him into the player into the villain. Right. And I called this when Micah Parsons got drafted back in 2021. I had a video talking about it where I said, once Micah's contract comes up and they're going to pay him whatever's the market value, the fan base is going to turn on him. They're going to find a way to turn on him because if, I'm a Penn State guy, I know how Micah operates. And at the end of the day, they're just going to do that bullshit. And that's why I get annoyed because it's like what I don't like is we have conversations about trading the player, which again, that's a healthy conversation. I don't think that's saying like, oh, we can't trade. That's a healthy conversation to have. Hey, can we get a big haul for this player and go for like how other teams do it? But what I don't like is then when the player gets paid, whether that's Dak Prescott, whether that's Trevon Diggs, whether that's you could I don't know, what's his name, Terrence Steele, any player, even CeeDee Lamb. The big thing is I'm not saying they're not immune to criticism. I want to be very clear on that. All I'm saying is that I just don't like as soon as a player gets their money, the fan base turns on the player, basically making them seem like they're the worst person ever. When it's like, hello, who's giving them this money? The front office is ultimately deciding to give them this contract. That's not the player's fault or their agent's fault that, hey, this front office is giving us what we want. Like when Dak Prescott signed his extension, like right before agreed to terms on the extension before the Browns game, it's not Dak's fault that he re-signed with Dallas. That's the Cowboys front, because they had every opportunity to just be like, yo, Dak, we're just going to let you go. Right? We've seen teams like the Broncos take a huge cap hit with Russell Wilson to move on and go get another quarterback. That's possible. But again, that's just where my line of thinking is, Chris, is just I don't like, where we're at. I just don't like how we know how this team builds. And rather than attacking the front office for their inaction, we have content creators out here and other people out here that are trying to attack the players rather than the front office for some reason.
Or the fans. Look at all these ungrateful Cowboys fans, man.
Yeah. Apparently, we're ungrateful for trying to hold the front office accountable for their inaction. But
look at all these ungrateful Cowboys fans, man.
Yes.
Even though we haven't made the NFC Championship in 30 years, but I mean, like we already know that. Yeah, I mean, no, that's the thing, right? Like when it comes to team building, I'm tired of this front office using these contracts as an excuse to not be more proactive in free agency. Like they did all right this time around. Like that's fine. Like I get it. When you look at this team now, I would say linebacker, I feel really good about that spot, especially with DeMarvion Overshown coming back. I think Sanborn's a damn good football player. I think Maris is going to be even better in year 2. I think with Kenneth Murray, there is some things. When you look at this defensive line, you add Dante Fowler. I think that's an upgrade from Chauncey Golson, especially as a pass rusher. Solomon Thomas is a nice depth piece that they added. I think Mozzie will be better this year. I think that they did some things on the defensive side of the ball to where you say, hey, this could be a unit that plays some pretty damn good football this year. Where I will defend the front office is this. I think a lot of these positions that they're going to need to fill, wide receiver, running back, defensive tackle. I think I might have said this already, but I'm on, I talk a lot. I think that you can find those positions in this draft. And honestly, the guys that you're probably going to get at wide receiver, running back are better players than what is out there on the market. So I will say that.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. No, I completely agree. Now, I actually wanted to turn our attention now kind of closer to the draft and where the Cowboys might be looking. Now, when Paris Campbell signed with the Cowboys, there was a quote that was mentioned by John Machota that I think could give us a glimpse of where I think they're going to go with this first pick if this player is available. So he mentioned that I think a big thing is obviously the speed I bring. And he mentions how he always has been seen as that as his biggest weapon, his speed. And it sounds like they want to get guys with speed. So he says he believes that the thing they're trying to do in Dallas with Clayton Adams and Brian Schottenheimer with building this offense is something that suits his capabilities, which is speed routes. And then he said also, I know Coach Schottenheimer wants to be a physical, tough, and wants us to be physical, tough, and fast. And he says that's him. That's how I take my approach to the game as well. And then they kind of went on more so as to like talking about how they want to add speed. Now you might be saying like, well, Space, like, why are you reading into this? Well, to me, that kind of tells me I think and we talked about it, Chris, like we had inklings that the way they were building this roster looks like they were trying to line up for a wide receiver now. To me, the wide receiver they're describing sounds like Matthew Golden. The way that they're talking, and again, whether you like him or not as a prospect, I'm just saying, like, you got to read the tea leaves sometimes when it comes to the Cowboys. Now, did they meet with him at the combine? I don't recall. I don't think so. But remember, he is from Texas. And I kind of said the same thing about Ashton Genty in that same video or that podcast, is that if there is a player that's from Texas, SMU, or a local school, they're not going to use a combine visit on them, right? They're going to wait till Dallas Day or their pro day. Now, that's where I wanted to get your opinion on it, because we talked about like between McMillan and Golden, and I think that while McMillan would be a better fit for the Cowboys, I think Golden's a talented player, but I mean, what do you think from those comments that we're hearing about them adding speed?
And here's my thing. I think they, I mean, with Turpin and now with Paris Campbell, adding those guys, to me, that speed that they already added. I think that they're looking at, what's his name? I think they're looking at Tet McMillan, because I think that they want to complement to what they have in CD Lamb. So
Right.
it's like, okay, you know, um, you have Ted on the outside, you have CD Lamb, he could be your slot Z receiver, um, and you could do some things like that. To me, when you talk about Tedderell McMillan, I think that he is like a tier above Matthew Golden, in my personal opinion. Like, I think that, like, I consider Tedderell McMillan to be a tier one receiver, regardless of the draft. Like, if he was in last year's draft, I think he's a tier one receiver. I don't think the same thing about Matthew Golden. I think he's in like that tier two. Like, let's just say Jackson Smith and Jigba when he was coming out in the draft. That's what I would like more so put him in when it comes to that. Like, to me, Tet McMillan is just a perfect complement to what you already have in CeeDee Lamb, which is why I say I think that they're more interested in that, because I think that a big body X receiver to me would do much better for this offense than a guy like Matthew Golden. Um, and I think, to be honest with you, I think Emeka Egbuka might be a little higher on their board than Matthew Golden, just because when you look at what they want to do with running the football out of those cut splits, um, a lot of that is, Emeka Egbuka is a guy who blocks his ass off. I don't look at Matthew Golden as a guy like that. So I still think that when you look at this draft, I think to me, it starts with Tet for them and then everybody else.
Got it. No, for sure, absolutely. I just think that once we get closer to the draft, usually when you look at who they met with at the combine and then also on Dallas Day, there's usually a huge chunk of a possibility that they might go out in that route. I do like Matthew Golden. I just think that's, and I think he'd be fine here in Dallas because he wouldn't have to be the number one. But then again, we talked about it before, and I agree with you here. I think that with Tet McMillan, you get a guy that is going to complement CD as opposed to kind of do the same things, which, I mean, hey, there's nothing wrong with having two CD Lambs on your team, but it's just a matter of when you're trying to build a team a particular way, you want to make sure, like when you look at the Eagles, right, you have two receivers on that team, and AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, that complement each other well. You have one dude that's smaller, able to do things, on a faster scale, and then you have a big body target in AJ Brown that's, good at getting open and things of that accord. But that's kind of, or like you look at Jamar Chase and T Higgins, right? Or you look at other teams, like you don't get two receivers that play the same, right? You get two dudes that complement and they do different things, and you can do other things with them, right? But then again, we'll see how things go, because there have been mock drafts where like the Cowboys are the first team that takes a receiver, right? Or like they're the second team that takes a receiver. But aside from that, man, I think that there really wasn't anything else on the news front that we had to talk about, because it's been quiet since the Cowboys haven't made any moves. I mean, was there anything else that you had that we wanted to go over? Because I don't really. I'm
Nah.
looking. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm just checking. I didn't see anything.
Yeah, nah. Everything's off my chest. That we can now
Awesome.
we can get into that mock draft. Let us.
Hell yeah, let's do it.
Let me.
Um, and again, we're gonna do no trades because I don't think the Cowboys are going to facilitate a trade, because it looks like that they're kind of just staying and picking kind of thing. That's what it looks like.
All right, we'll start the draft and.
Holy crap. Okay, let's see who went before we get into this. So Cam Ward, or sorry, Shador Sanders, Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, Will Campbell, Mason Graham, Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty at 7, Barron, Golden, Warren, and Bua. Okay, gotcha. Okay, so let's take a look to see who's available because clearly
I think Jackson Dart's going to be the pick at 9. By the way,
I think so too. Yeah, I think that Jackson Dart's going top 10 this year. But let's take a look to see who's available. But
this
I
to
think
me is a no-brainer.
yeah, I think it's a no-brainer as well. I think that it's Tet and it's not even close. So let's go for it. All
And
right.
then we
Now,
went a little too fast on
yeah,
that.
let's slow that down. Yeah. I was gonna say I didn't realize you paused. I was like, oh no, like all right, let's yeah. So that's good. Slow it down a bit. All right. So we're coming up on our next pick.
So here's the thing. To me, let me go over a few pen throws that I would have. That's
Yeah.
what they call them in the scouting world. To me, Xavier Watts is a pen throw. Caleb Johnson is a pen throw. Donovan Jackson's a pen throw. And same as Maxwell Harrison. But still have a pretty decent board. I mean, Tyreek Williams there to me. I mean, I got to take him there. In
Yeah.
my personal opinion, but I mean, when you look at these running backs, I feel fine holding off on them until the next round. A guy like Tyreek Williams to me, I
Well, let me
mean,
see who else is on the board. We do have Demetrius Knight Jr., who I'm a fan of out of South Carolina.
you
Jaden
mom and
Higgins.
yelling.
Just as a heads up, I understand we took a receiver. Jaden Higgins, a guy I like as well as a second. Quinishon Junkins is a running back that I like as well.
Elijah Arroyo, Darren
Turner.
Ford,
So
Jared
you have
Allen.
options. The good news is you have options, and I would say for me at least, I think that like part of me would think that the Cowboys are either going to look at this pick being a hey, do we take another defensive line? But to me, I don't think they're going to take a defensive lineman. I think that they're going to take an edge rusher or a linebacker. Just kind of how they position that's just my opinion. I think if their board was here, I would think they're either going to go after Demetrius Knight or but the problem is with him is he's on the older side of things.
Yeah,
I think he's like 24, 23.
yeah.
But I do think another player I would look at is what's his name? A Princely. Because
You mom and yelling.
yeah, I think that because to me they're going to need a long-term edge replacement. Oh, but space. They got Tyrus Wheat. They got Sam Williams, bro. I'm telling you right now. Like I think that you have a dude that can kind of
Here,
slot in. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
here's my thing. I think that Braden, maybe Braden Swinson. But here's the thing: the problem that I have with these edges is these are 3-4 guys. We were on a 4-3. I mean, like if you're adding an edge, I feel like Jack Sawyer or and I'm not saying this because I'm an
Mhm.
Ohio State fan, or JT Tuimoloau would be a better fit because these guys are 3-4 guys. You know, we already have a Dante Fowler on this team. We already, you know what I'm saying? We already have a Micah Parsons, guys who are more so your traditional 3-4 outside linebackers. I mean, if they took Princely, I think that at that point you got to say we got to run a 3-4 because we
Right.
just that's where our personnel is. And
But
especially because you lost Golston, who's a 4-3 edge to me, and you brought in Fowler, who's a 3-4 outside linebacker, in my personal opinion. So if we're taking these guys, it's under the assumption that we're switching to a 3-4, which
mhm.
is not what Eberflus does. So
Yeah,
that's why I would take
that's
Tyler Williams.
yeah, I gotcha. I'm also just trying to think. So d- d- they didn't have to pick up Mozzie's fifth year because that's next year. So
Mm.
I'm just trying to think long term what they would do. Like, you know what I mean? Because I don't.
I think they'd be looking at one of these corners,
That's what I was thinking. But like again, like because to
but
me
I
the
think it's running back in my personal opinion. I think they're going to go after
like
the
that's
running back.
like I think yeah like because I personally like not to kind of like sway it a different way and not to take the Ohio because again those are great players. It's just that I'm trying to put the cowboy hat on, right? And I really think, Chris, that what they would do is they would reach for running back early, whether we like it or not. But the
Yeah.
running back of
Yeah.
choice might vary. Like if it were me and who's on the board, I'm looking at a Henderson to well, let me see. Sorry, Scadaboo's way too high. I'm not sure why he's even that high to begin
No,
with.
and I think that media scouts are higher on Scadaboo than NFL teams.
Yeah. Uh, RJ Harvey. But like, so I mean, let me ask you this as an Ohio State guy, right? Would you prefer, for what the Cowboys are trying to do, be physical, run the ball? Would you prefer Judkins or Henderson and his explode? Like, what do you think would complement the Cowboys now and in the long term?
I mean, you already have Javonte Williams, who I do think that they want like a part because Javonte Williams, even though like people don't think he's a good running back, and I'm kind of in that same board, I think he's like okay. He does some things that are valuable. Like he is very good in pass protection. He's very good catching the ball out of the backfield. Those things to me are valuable. So I think personally, like somebody who's going to complement him better would be Travion Henderson. Like Travion Henderson is a guy to me extremely explosive, can make big plays, can turn the game around. I mean, you saw in that Texas game against Ohio State, that screen pass that he caught and took to the house completely flipped the Buckeye season there. So
Mhm.
that's why I say Travion Henderson to me is a guy
I
who I would pick because I just think the explosiveness is just too valuable.
And I completely agree. I think also with to that point, Chris, I think we'll go with him. The other reason why I'm a big fan of taking Henderson is because you would think, okay, you get Henderson to be a long-term guy, but you can always go next year and get a guy that maybe is more of a power back, right? You know what I mean? So like that,
Yeah.
I think that's what so I think Henderson would probably be the pick here. Again, other dudes that I would probably argue, but I think that the Cowboys would kind of do the opposite here. They would actually go with a running back early this go around.
Hey, you want to know what? If we need a power back, I know a guy. Got that Zekel.
Zekel got the Zekel. Let's go with Henderson. Let's see how we go from here.
That Zekel. I think we'll be able to run the ball. We got some explosiveness in the backfield there with Henderson, and we're
He's
going to
fucking
bring
out.
in that Zekel.
The fucking Zekel, bro.
CJ West is starting to get up draft boards as he should, but I'm
Yep, and we said that was gonna happen as well. Okay, so we're back on the board here, and
to me, I know that we may be sacrificing other needs. Mason Taylor to me is just like a blinking red light. Like
I'm
I would
shocked he's here too. Like,
I would take him in a heartbeat. Jake Ferguson on the last year of his contract. I know we haven't taken a defensive lineman. I'm willing to wait for the fifth
I
round because
mean,
where
yeah.
the Cowboys are, in my personal opinion, when it comes to their defensive lineman situation, is that they need a fat boy, and you can get those guys that play at a high level in the fifth round. I don't think a guy like Mason Taylor, who's as reliable as they come as a pass catcher, a guy who you can put in there with Jake Ferguson, and now you're able to run 12 personnel effectively. To me, Mason Taylor is the pick here, and I'm not looking back.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of crazy for those who don't know. Mason is actually the son of Jason Taylor, the Hall of Fame defensive end. Um, I do like what he like to me. If the Cowboys had not taken Luke Schoonmaker, I would have been looking at Mason Taylor as an option, and I think that he's still an option. I think that look, he's going to be 21 years old, young dude. And on top of that, to me, but here's the thing too, Chris, is that if you take Mason Taylor, you're signaling that you're not paying um Jake Ferguson, which is fine. Like I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah,
But but
like my thing with that is just he's the best player available on my board, and it's by a little bit here, which is why like
I
we
would
can't yell at the Cowboys for not taking the best
take the
player
best player.
available
Yeah.
and then not take the best player
And
available.
Stevie Mac did mention you could try to trade Ferguson. Do I think they will? Probably not. But let's do it. Let's take Mason Taylor. I think that
Yeah,
he's the best player on the
yeah,
board,
yeah.
and he fits their measurables. So, um,
And then if they need anybody to do the interview, I'll be ready to go. Just make sure that his relatives are there, if you know what I mean.
oh my god, dude. Yeah, and that's right, Stevie. And that's part of what I love I see on film with Taylor is that he's very consistent at what he does. All right, so we made it to 149.
Check the quarterbacks first. You know who I'm like 149. I'm gonna stand on the table for Kyle McCord here.
as well. How far until our next pick, though? What is it, 171?
171. And when I look at this board, I'm looking at
I could
Kobe
probably,
King
yeah,
up
I
in
could,
front.
dude, honestly, we could probably wait on some of these defensive players like the Cody Simons and the Strausmans of the world. Um, like I would honestly prefer to, like, if we're gonna take a quarterback, you're gonna probably have to do it here.
Yeah, so I think we both
Let's
agree
go
on
with Kyle McCord.
on
Let's do it.
McCord.
And then we pray to God we don't get wiped out.
I don't think we're gonna get wiped out because I look at so there's Simeon Barrow Jr. Haven't really watched his tape, but 6'3", 290. We kind of already have that mold.
There is Danny Strausman. The Cowboys did meet with him as well. The
There is
linebacker.
Tonka Hemingway, but yeah, when you
Uh,
look at
mhm. Go for it.
uh, a linebacker and defensive tackle is what I'm looking at.
I think I would probably go with Strausman here first.
Let's
Just
check
because I
out
think he's going to go off the board before we pick again.
and that is the linebacker, right?
The linebacker out of Ohio, I said Ohio State. Fuck, Oklahoma. The Cowboys did
Stutzman.
meet with
Yeah.
him. Yes, the Cowboys did meet with him.
Okay,
And there's
gotcha.
Simpson. Yeah. So we're probably going to lose one of the two. So, um,
Um, might have got
son
him
of a.
might have got him wiped out of defensive tackle.
I mean, I think you still have options, but it's not as. But then again, knowing how the Cowboys have constructed their team, I don't think they're going to prioritize defensive players as much as I think people. There is Ty Robinson on the board still from
Nash
Nebraska.
Hutchmacher is
Yeah,
another
him as
guy that I
well.
like.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Ty Robinson, I do like Ty Robinson. I know this would be like a little bit of a reach here, but I don't really care. I think he's a pretty
We
damn
should.
good
I think
qualifier.
we should go after. Yeah, I think we should go after him. Just kind of because we have another pick coming up in 204.
And that's the thing. I know that it says like on the thing, like, oh, well, he's worth this much. Like this is where we rank him. But at the same time, is this that like big fat dude? Oh shit.
Yeah. What? Cameron Jackson? I think he is.
Yeah.
Let me just.
Is
Let me
that the
just.
big fat dude? The like the huge fat dude?
I'm double checking right now.
You know, I think
Yes.
I think they take in this situation. I think they take Jake
Take Jake
Majors.
Majors. That's exactly what I'm thinking. They're going to probably take Jake Majors here, because what you do is honestly you probably need another backup center. If they're going to go the route I think they're going to go. So let's take Jake Majors here, and then we got
Well,
a
let's
couple more
see.
picks. We
Oh,
made
there
it.
we go.
Let's take. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think we. Yeah, let's go for it. Take him.
Yeah. That's a perfect compliment there. I really like how this draft came out.
Honestly, I'm feeling the same way. And then here we go. What other picks we got?
Ooh, I know who I'm taking here. I'm
Holland
taking
Pierce.
Howland
All right,
Pierce.
let's do it. Mm-hmm.
6'8", 344.
Yep, for sure. Let's do it.
Boom.
Then
Oh,
we
I
got
like this
one.
draft a lot.
Yeah. Definitely came around towards the back end of the draft. And then I would probably say again, you could pick. I don't really give a shit with the
Yeah.
um I mean, if it were me, I'm kind of just taking whatever team.
I thought
Hold
that
on.
said Dan Rogers. Oh, you want to know what? One guy who I'm starting to really like here,
Mhm.
Jackson Meeks from
Yeah.
Syracuse. This guy had over 1,000 yards this year, and
Okay.
he's a bigger guy, like 6'2", 210. This guy made some plays this year, so seventh round, I think that's a damn steal if you're able to get Jackson Meeks in the 7th round.
Mhm. Okay, let's see how we did. So they're saying we should have drafted Princely, which whatever. Um, they're probably going to give us like a C plus or a B for this because they gave
B
us a B
plus.
plus. I mean, I'm not a fan of like how they're making Ty Robinson an F or Trevin Henderson a D. I don't understand the grades, but
That's an A plus to me. These first 3 picks, first 4, because everybody knows I'm very high on McCord. These are all A pluses to me.
yeah, and I think that what I like about this draft is that you front load the offensive side of the ball with picks because you basically are giving Brian Schottenheimer the keys to building the offense for how he wants it, right? And giving him a quarterback that he can look to develop. And you could say with space, we could have used some edge guys, but it's like I really think that the Cowboys are more so looking at it from a lens of we're going to build the defense through free agency to a certain extent, and then we're going to draft the offense. Because I really think that we're going to probably see Brian Schottenheimer on display here. Because I think he's going to want to, because he's a first-year coach. He wants to implement his offense, and I think this would be great. You get a weapon to pair outside of CeeDee Lamb. You get a running back that doesn't have to immediately be your starter, but can turn into your starter. You get your Jake Ferguson replacement if you elect not to pay him, or worst case, you get a guy that's going to be consistent for you long term as a tight end too. Kyle McCord's your developmental quarterback and possible could be your future starter. And you just fill out the depth elsewhere. I mean, there's like, when you go,
I gotta say, I love these picks, like Stutzman and Robinson. I'm like, all right, I feel all right about that. Like, these last few picks, I think you get tremendous value here. Like Jake Majors in the 6th round. I mean, you got your backup center there, and maybe if he plays good enough, I look, I'm going into this and I'm saying, hey, I don't want to move BB to guard, but I'm not opposed to the idea. If Jake Majors comes in and he plays good football, man, you got to think about starting this guy day one and moving BB to right guard.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got, like, what I love is you doubled down on running back. You got your juice guy in Travion Henderson, and then you got your big power back in Taj Brooks, on top of the fact that you add Holland Pierce, who's a very high upside offensive tackle, and a guy in Jackson Meeks, who, I mean, when I watched Kyle McCord's tape, dude, this guy made plays, man. He made plays all over the field. Let me see if I can share this. But yeah, I mean, like, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, damn, that is a really good draft, man. And I'm very happy with how that played out, me personally.
No, yeah, for sure. And I think to Stevie Mac's point, like I would like if they signed another corner in free agency, and the draft would be legit. Yeah, I think that for me at least, I think long term I would like a draft like that. But then again, I will be honest, I am more offensively side of the ball biased than on the defense. But like the way that I'm looking at it though is that the Cowboys need to.
Dude, look at this kid play, man. This kid is first off, he's big.
He's got the measurables they would like. Yeah.
Yeah. Like able to create separation, and there's legit nuance there, right? Like he's setting cornerbacks up and he's getting separation like that. Like very reliable guy. I'm surprised that he's only a 6th round guy. Like I think that this guy fills a lot of boxes here. Yak, very good. There's really not much of a weakness to his game. I know, I was talking to Foots about it, and he was saying like his play strength is a little off. But I mean, in the 7th round, you're just not gonna catch me upset about this guy. I mean, look at this, right?
And again, yeah, and to your point, like it's not like he's played in a bad conference, or more specifically, like against low-level opponents. Like he's playing in the ACC, a Power 4 conference, and he's doing these things. Given where Syracuse football is at, like in Syracuse football,
look at this catch. Look at that catch right there.
Yeah, amazing
come
stuff.
on.
And that's why I think for Syracuse, I think that I think it worked out perfect for him because you put him in a situation where he doesn't have the same talent level he had at Ohio State, but he's still producing and he's still putting up good numbers. And I think that for me, when I look at Kyle McCord, he does. Okay,
I'm talking about Jackson Meeks. I'm talking about the receiver.
The receiver. But I did want to bring up Kyle McCord as well, because you look at how he's throwing the ball, right, and where he's. But I do love the receiver too. Like I don't want to. But I think also what makes this work is that you get a guy that if you play him in preseason, he can help Kyle McCord out. You know what I mean? Because they know each other. But what I
look at that catch.
But yeah, like I just think I'm shocked that. I'm shocked he's a 6th or 7th round guy.
Yeah.
But even for McCord, I'm shocked McCord is even like just a 5th round dude.
I mean, you see how he's throwing the football, right? In rhythm, going through reads. getting the ball down the field. I mean, that's a dot right there.
I'll say this. I think that at his ceiling, I do think McCord, and I'm not saying it's because he's wearing the number 6. He does remind me a bit of Baker Mayfield with early on in his career. And I think that it's just a matter of can you develop him to get there. But
Yeah.
he does have the intangibles of being a starter in the league. But
I
will he?
personally think the difference between him and Baker is that his footwork, I even think coming out of college, is better than what Baker Mayfield's was. Like what I
Yeah.
love about Kyle McCord is that he's not like a super mobile quarterback. He's not like one of these, and he was going to catch this dig route here. And that's, I mean, look at how much separation that was. My thing is, it's not that he's like this super mobile Lamar Jackson type quarterback, but he's very light footed. Like when he needs to escape the pocket, he's able to escape the pocket. He's not like a burner with his speed, but he's able to extend plays, make plays out of structure. And I think he does a very good job of, like, he's a very smart quarterback, but he stays on schedule. And as people saw there, he got rid of that ball very quickly. Like he wants to get the ball out of his hands. So I'm looking at that and I'm saying, like, man, with the way he finished his college career, this guy was going to be a Heisman candidate next year. Syracuse football, 11-3 this past season. Did anybody expect Syracuse football to go 11-3 and finish 21st in the entire country? No. And a big part of that was because their offense was Kyle McCord. That's what their offense was. So I'm looking at a guy who, okay, you can elevate talent. And I've seen that. Like Syracuse had some nice pieces on their team. None of these guys are like Travis Hunter or the guys that Shedeur played with. He didn't have any of those guys like that. And yet you still saw, I think Syracuse finished up above Colorado in the rankings.
Yeah.
And he was a big reason why they beat some of these ranked teams. Shedeur struggled against Nebraska. Are we sitting here saying that Syracuse wouldn't have beat Nebraska? I think Syracuse would have beaten the brakes off Nebraska. So it's kind of things like that.
No, and I agree. And I think like also the thing is again, like I do believe if McCord was on, I think if he was on that Ohio State team, I don't even think any of the games they've had were close. I think Oregon, they took it. I think the game versus Texas goes different. Like I don't think it comes down to the Bears. I think
Will Howard held them back, and they would have beat the. I guess I got to say, because I got to be professional here, they would have beat Michigan. Like I truly believe that.
Yeah, for sure. No,
they would have beat. They almost beat Michigan in that national championship year. And that Ohio State team wasn't as good as the Ohio State team was this year. So
yeah, no, and I agree. I think that the thing is like that's what you want to see when you like for those that watch me or Chris or anybody when we talk about drafting quarterbacks. This is, and I'm not saying he's going to be like this. I want to be very clear because anything can happen, right? A player can reach the NFL and they can just flame out. When Dak Prescott was on the scene, he elevated that Mississippi State team into something that they never were. And I'm not saying Syracuse isn't or was never that. It's more so that when you look at a guy that when you have a quarterback go there or you have a player go there and they elevate the team to a level that you didn't expect them to, that says a lot about the player. And I think that's where when I look at a guy like Kyle McCord, I do see a guy that is a developmental quarterback that can turn into a starter if geography lottery hits it right for him. Do I think he could eventually become a starter in Dallas? Yeah, if he develops properly. But the thing is again, how it works is when you go from not every guy can translate properly. I think McCord can translate properly. I just think he just needs time. And I think what's good for him is that if he is a late round pick, he's not going to be forced. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he went in round 3 or 2 this year to like a team like the Saints, for example. Right. So, Chris, I don't have much else to add. I think we pretty much covered all the bases here. Was there anything else I could do to,
everything. I got
awesome.
everything off my chest.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, guys, look, we appreciate you so much for tuning in. Look, if you guys can hit the like button, subscribe, all that other stuff. Chris, do you have another podcast episode coming out on your channel?
Probably tomorrow. Yeah,
Tomorrow?
probably
Okay. Just to
tomorrow.
let
Yeah.
people know. Just to let people know. Yeah, so just look out for that tomorrow, and we will see you guys next week. Unless something crazy happens, of course. So, but yeah, Chris, it's good chatting with you as always, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right. See you guys.
See you.
Peace.
Bye bye.